It's good, boxing fans. So I didn't get a chance really to talk about the Triple G versus Willie Monroe fight. So I'll talk about that briefly. But the main topic at hand, which I'll get to in a second, as you can see in the title above, news that kind of went under the radar for the most part, as Kathy Duva pretty much confirms that there's early talks with Rock Nation for some part of next year for there to be, in a sense, for the boxing public, a super fight between Andre Ward and Sergey Kovalev. And in that, I mean, when you look at it on paper, you got two undefeateds fighting for what would be the light heavyweight championship of the world. And, in the beginning, or at least now, it's kind of tough to see how big of a seller it'll be, but I think that's why they're talking about letting the fight marinate, and being Andre Ward is making his I don't know if it's his official debut at above 168 pounds, but he has a fight against Paul Smith that's going to be airing on BET June 20th, and the fight is at 172-pound catch weight. But I'm not going to get too deep into that just yet. I will, I want to talk about just real quick the Golovkin-Monroe fight, because I wanted to do a video about it Sunday morning, just didn't get a chance to. But as expected, Gennady Golovkin just steamrolls through Willie Monroe, though Willie Monroe showed a lot of heart and showed little glimpses of being able to catch Golovkin with some shots really straight down the middle. Willie Monroe's a southpaw, showed some decent movement, but again, like something that I was telling, be it the GYGB clique, as well as just other people I talked to, you're not gonna. I don't think there's one particular way to beat Golovkin. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think there's several things you need to, in my opinion, beat him decisively. Number one, you need size. Number two, you need authoritative power. And you need, movement is one thing, but I think you need to apply a strategy that's going to eliminate Golovkin from trapping you. And there's ways, but it's not very easy, especially when you have a guy like Golovkin, who again is seen slick fighters before. I mean, when you look at his amateur record, you don't want to play the comparison game between the amateurs and the pros, but the point of amateur boxing is for you to get a lot of looks, to get a lot of different styles, mature your style, and then translate that into the pros, and then develop as a professional. So when people were talking prior to this fight about, like, he's never seen a style like Willie Monroe's, he's a slick fighter, he's gonna have a lot of trouble, I was one of the people saying I don't think he's gonna relatively have much trouble with him, and we saw that. Now the argument that's being made, I guess, is the fact that Willie Monroe did land shots on Golovkin, but Golovkin isn't a Willie Pep or a Floyd Mayweather or a Pernell Whitaker. I mean, we know that. We knew that going into the fight. But I think what we need to recognize with Gennady Golovkin is how effective he is. And when you talk about that first left hook that he landed on Willie Monroe, man, that's skill. That's not just a guy who's just throwing punches. He knows what he's doing, and he knows early on not necessarily to just engage right away. Because if you notice, this has been a trend with Golovkin that I kind of am starting to pick up on, or I kind of have picked up on in his last several fights. He takes a round or two to just really feel you out. He'll let you throw shots at him. And he kind of just picks your movements little by little. And he did that with Monroe. Like, Monroe was giving a movement, but then you started to notice that he would, like, I like to use this word, real estate. Like, he wasn't giving Monroe much real estate at all. So what he ended up doing was making Monroe fight in a phone booth. And while people will look at it like, oh, Golovkin doesn't have an inside game, well, look, he found out early on that Willie Monroe was not going to hurt him. And I think for the sake of him making a fight out of it, I mean, you saw what he did. He invited him to fight, and one punch that I think was probably Monroe's best punch, he landed a right uppercut right down the middle during like these flurries. And I think once he saw that Golovkin ate it, if you look at the trend throughout boxing and you look at guys that throw the kitchen sink at a fighter and they keep coming, it's discouraging as hell. And I think I saw the trend as the rounds went before, Monroe just said, I've had enough. You could see how discouraged he was. From at least rounds 4 to the fight ended, he was like, shit, I'm doing everything I can and this guy's still coming. So for the sake of Golovkin, this was how he was supposed to look. I think he fought a good fight. And I think for the most part, man, he's just riding off with the fact that people want to see him in exciting fights, and be it, the competition yet isn't there, he's making the best of it. And I was reading comments today about, he should fight this guy, he should fight that guy. But again, guys, like, nobody's really stepping to the table to fight this guy, man. I mean, and I'm not like necessarily trying to defend Golovkin in that manner, but like, let's look at the division. Let's look at the availability and the reality of certain fights that could be made for him. To me, I think the next options are going to be either Andy Lee, who has a WBO title, or the winner of Lemieux and then Dan. That's happening next month. So between those three guys are top 10 rated middleweights, and one of them is a champion. So from that point, man, I think really the fight that he's calling for is either a fight with Cotto or Canelo. And if anybody was in Golovkin's shoes at this point, that's the fight you want to take. That's the biggest money fight realistically he can get. And I think Canelo's probably the most likely of options in the immediate future. But at least for the remainder of this year, man, I think he's at a point where he's looking like to wipe the division out. And I think if he beats the winner of Lemieux and Dan, and he beats Andy Lee, I mean, he pretty much at that point is wiped out, with the exception of Miguel Cotto, who's the WBC, lineal champion. He's beaten everybody. So now to segue into Andre Ward, because Andre Ward is the guy that many people who maybe aren't partial to the hype that's behind Golovkin, and look, it's understandable. HBO, they got a guy there who's knocking the fuck out of people, and they're riding that coattail. It's business. It's understandable. So with that being said, people who want to see Golovkin in more competitive fights, and I'm on that same boat. There's people who want, obviously want that Andre Ward fight. Now, again, like to segue into Andre Ward. Andre Ward is making his return next month against Paul Smith after close to a 1.5-year absence. And in boxing, a 1.5 years can be an eternity. So you look at what Andre Ward has done at 168 pounds. He's pretty much beaten everybody, being in the Super 6. That was 3 years ago. And after that, he fought Chad Dawson, who came from light heavyweight down. But since then, I mean, he hasn't. That's the last big fight on his resume. So he's fighting at 172-pound catchweight, which when I read that, eyebrow raised, because it's fighting from 168 to 172, in my opinion, is a jump. That's in my opinion technically a jump to light heavyweight. And being that he hasn't fought in a 1.5 years, and Ward's not getting any younger, a lot of people are starting to think, well, shit, man. Kovalev and Stevenson likely isn't happening anytime soon because of the whole Al Heyman HBO main events situation. And Andre Ward, it looked, at least to me, as if, they won the Golovkin fight, but even Virgil Hunter was mentioning, like, that fight doesn't make any sense right now financially because neither guy has been on pay-per-view, and they want to make that the biggest event possible. Now, at the same time, you don't want to wait 5 years for a fight like that to materialize, like we had to wait for Mayweather-Pacquiao. But neither of those guys are at that level of popularity and or bring in that type of money where both guys can fight for 3, 4, 5 years fighting whoever's there without fighting one another. It's a totally different scenario here. I mean, both of these guys can make next year for a really big event. I don't think it's a 1.6, 1.7 million pay-per-view buys, but for the boxing public, I mean, that is a really, really big fight. So what we heard today, or at least the interview I saw today, and this was stemming from Sergey Kovalev's press conference that he had for his upcoming fight. Can't recall the guy he's fighting. You know, they asked Kathy Duva, you know, what is the situation as far as, or is there any validity to there being talks with main events in Rock Nation to set up a super fight between, or at least in boxing terms, a super fight between Andre Ward and Sergey Kovalev? And she said, you know, there's early talks with Rock Nation. She's had a long relationship with David Iskowitz, who was a former, who runs Rock Nation Sports as far as the boxing department, and she's had a long relationship with him, you know, when he was with Golden Boy. So, and being that Andre Ward, at least now is a guy that has fought on HBO. There doesn't seem to be any situation with Rock Nation and HBO. Being, you know, there's a Cotto Canelo fight penciled in. Cotto beats Daniel Gill next month. So I don't think there's much of an issue in that department for that fight to be made. I don't think it's a fight that should be made like this year, but I think if Andre Ward looks good at 172 and really there's essentially nobody at 168, I think really, man, they could start the extension of Ward going to 175 pounds, where I think he may be stronger. I think he'll be fine at 175 pounds. So I don't think that's a fight that's going to happen immediately, but we have to kind of wait and see what happens with both guys now leading into next year. And as far as Gennady Golovkin's concerned for Andre Ward, I mean, personally, I want to see the fight. I just don't think it's very realistic at this point. And if it's a situation where Ward's going up to light heavyweight, I don't think that fight's ever going to happen, because I honestly don't think Golovkin's going to 168. And I think the only guy, or really maybe only two guys that make for a big fight would be Carl Froch, where, you know, he can go, Golovkin could go to England, fight at Wembley or the O2 Arena, and that would be a sellout, you know. But and then with Andre Ward, at least right now, that's not the biggest money fight that they could make. So at this point, you know, it's really like, who does Golovkin fight from here? I think Cotto and Canelo are his big money fights. And I think for Andre Ward next year, man, I think he needs a dance partner, and so does Sergey Kovalev, because like I said, Kovalev, excuse me, Kovalev is not going to he's not going to be fighting any big name guys. So we'll have to wait and see how that materializes. But as it stands, there are early discussions. Nothing that's going to be put on paper anytime soon. But I'm happy to read this, because it's a fight that in the last few months I've been thinking about. With Andre Ward making his return back, I've always thought when he was making his return, the light heavyweight division was going to be where I think he's going to start to move to. There's nothing at 168, and I don't think he can afford to wait a year and change for Golovkin to come up, you know, and I don't blame him in that department. So we'll have to wait and see how that materializes. But tonight, tune in, 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, the GYGB Boxing Podcast. We're going to be talking about this weekend's fights, as well as the upcoming this weekend. We have Andre Duva, Andre Dirrell's fighting against DeGille, which is going to be on CBS afternoon. Well, not prime time, but CBS 4 o'clock, and that should be an interesting fight. So we'll be talking about that, and as well as kind of getting into the potential Ward and Kovalev fight, amongst other things. So click the link below after this video, and as I always say, subscribe, hit the links, and I'll be back to you soon.